So my name is Adam Robitaro. I am the art director for Greater Than Games. I am the illustrator for all of the Sentinel Comics lines, so Sentinels of the Multiverse, Sentinel Tactics, the Sentinel Comics RPG that's coming up, and I've done a handful of other things with this company, but that's most of my experience. So.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Clausen. I'm the creative director for Greater Than Games. So I've worked on Laser Riders, Spirit Island, did a little bit of consultation with Fate of the Elder Gods, and then pretty much everything else that's kind of run through I've had a hand in somewhere. So.
Absolutely. So I am Nolan Nasser, and I am a illustrator, independent illustrator. I do a lot of work for Greater Than Games. I've also done some work with like indie tabletop companies, like publishing D&D modules, things like that. Done some work with other games, with other publishing companies like Elzra and some other indie publishers like Letterman Games. How many of you guys are gamers? Are you guys? Yeah, awesome, right on, good. I imagine, like being here, you might enjoy a game or two. Awesome, that's good. It's always great to be passionate about the things that you're working on. So, but yeah, so I do a lot of work with Greater Than Games, and a lot of their titles I've had a hand in.
And my name is Kwanchai Moria. I'm also a freelance illustrator, and I've done a lot of games with different publishers, Catacombs and Capital Lux, Kodama. I flip ships on the floor, this convention, Dinosaur Island, a couple other things. But
Yeah, that's right, Dinosaur Island.
been around.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that's
So
me.
good. Yeah. So, welcome to Illustrations in Board Games. Illustrating in Board Games. How many of you guys are illustrators? And if you are not, if you have an interest in illustration, or is anybody publishers or wanting to like work with illustrators?
I do mostly motion graphics and After Effects.
Fantastic.
Oh, very cool.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yep.
I have a 10-year webcomic.
Oh, awesome. Excellent. Okay.
That's exciting.
Yeah, very cool.
So we have a lot of different perspectives at the table here. Kwanchai and I have done a lot of freelance work, and not just in the game industry too, right? Like you've done a lot of work. You've done work in other industries as well.
A lot.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, and so we've got creative directors,
Yeah.
like comic artists, like publisher. Like Adam has had a hand in designing and publishing. So we have lots of different.
Yeah, really all across the board. So anything you want to know, we could probably
Right.
help with.
Right. So.
Shoot your hand up.
Yeah, this is totally a roundtable discussion. If you guys have questions, shoot them at us. Otherwise, we'll just talk at you.
Yeah.
I can talk at you for the entire 2 hours if you want.
Can't.
I know. Yeah,
Well, what do you want us to know first? I
that's,
guess.
that's fair.
I mean, yeah, that's
Like, how did you get in, and then how did
Okay.
What are you
Yeah, we
looking
can
for?
start
How,
there.
how about that?
so. I mean, I'll start. I have kind of a little bit of an unconventional path to where I got in that I would draw and not get paid for it for a really long time, and then I started this company with 2 friends of mine, and then and then that was my first paying art job basically, and I've been doing that since then. So I kind of just made my own way with it, and that's not how most people do it, but it is a way you can do it.
So I actually started outside of the gaming field. I started in advertising. My first job was at a newspaper, and so I kind of worked my way up from the advertising side into more of the development side. I was working with factories, creating like home decor and figuring out how things work and how to build things from the ground up. And then that was funneled into finally my passion for gaming. And so I started working for Greater Than Games, and I was able to take all of that information and start working with outside artists because I had done freelance previously. So I freelanced for 10 years, I think it was. So was able to take some of that information and start pulling on the creative director side and overseeing projects, doing project management, things like that.
Oh God, what was the question?
Yeah.
How did-
Start to get into it.
how did- yeah. I got a degree in history. That didn't work out so good. And then I went back to school. I went to Art Center College of Design in Pasadena for my degree. I graduated with an illustration degree, but I was gaming before and after. And one of those gaming things was the first job I got was Catacombs, and then went from there.
You got that job because you were doing like you did like a fan art piece, or like kind of like
Yeah.
you just redesigned one of their characters, right? You were like, hey, this would look cool.
Yeah, I was doing board game redesigns on Board Game Geek
right.
before, back when it was real small, back in 2004, and I did a bunch of like stuff like a zombie thing,
Yeah,
and then
yes.
an ogre redesign, and then that's how I got, because it was a smaller world back then,
Right.
so publishers would
Yeah.
like geek mail you, like, hey, what are you
Yeah,
doing?
yeah.
And yeah, that's how I kind of got up on my feet.
Right.
And then actually doing conventions as an illustrator has been the difference between, being a whatever and then getting there.
Absolutely.
That's been the main thing.
Yep.
Truly, yeah.
So you guys are all on the right path since you are all at a convention right now. This is the best thing any of us could recommend.
What's a board game redesign?
It's a word I made up. I don't think it exists. I don't know. It's not a thing necessarily, but I took back when there was only like every category game had one board game that you could play in it, and Puerto Rico was the only heavy game you could get. There was a lot of out of print stuff, so what I would do is just take this framework and mechanics and just do a bunch of art. I wasn't doing anything. I had a history degree, a lot of time on my hands, and I just punching out all this art that I just put up on the internet for download to print and play. So
That can be a
Cool.
great way to start a portfolio.
Yeah.
If you're still trying to build up your art, or you're like, if you know what you want to do and you're like, oh, I really want to do layout for board games or things like that, a great way to start a portfolio is just to take something that you see that you're like, this could have maybe been better, and put your spin on it, put your art on it, things like that. And that's a great way to show, because it's just for a portfolio piece. It's a great way to show, this is how I would have done it, and this is, why I thought this way. Things like that are really good for starting out a portfolio.
I mean, that's actually kind of how I started too. So I've been working in the game industry for about 3 years. But before that, I was going to school for web design. I was like, I really want to just have a job that pays. I didn't think I could make anything of myself as an illustrator. And then one day, like a switch just flipped, and I was like, I'm going to teach myself how to digitally paint. And so I did that. And I was also at the time playing Magic really competitively. And so of course, like I really wanted to be, like my aspiration was to be an artist for Magic. Originally, it was to be on the Pro Tour, and that might, who knows. But I was like, I can't make a living doing that either. Can't make a living doing that. I don't want to be a web designer. I got it. I'll be an artist for Magic. So I started out. Before I got hired for anybody or doing anything, I was redesigning Magic tokens. I was just making tokens for Magic, or like redesigning my own tokens. I wasn't working for them or anything, and that's how I started doing a lot of my art. And they are the worst tokens I've ever seen in my life. But one of them got me a job. At least one. It was 1/3 of the job that I got with you guys. So eventually, I saw that Greater Than Games had put out a call for artists.
I remember you did like a water spirit.
Yeah, and that was actually a
was-
token
that was
that
what-
I had done.
Oh, that was the token.
that was a token that I
okay.
designed.
That is what
Yep.
got you the job then.
Awesome. Great. Good to know. But yeah, so Greater Than Games put out a call for artists, and I sent them just some of the stuff that I had already done. Like they were looking for artists that could do like spirit type things.
Yeah, we were
And-
looking specifically for watercolor stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I had sent you guys the spirit, but then I also did a couple other watercolor pieces so that I could do the style too.
Right.
Yeah. and then on top of that, after applying for that job, came and hassled you guys at Gen Con every year until you guys were just like, all right, we'll be friends with you, I guess.
I guess
It didn't take much work.
Yeah. So that's how I started. Yeah.
So you said you taught yourself the digital paint.
Yes.
How did you go about that process?
So I mean, I had taken illustration classes and things like that as like electives in college, and then also I've been drawing since I was like all through high school and stuff. I took art classes and things like that. What's that?
I said since you can pick up a crayon.
Yeah, really, yes. But I didn't really have a ton of like traditional education on it, so I just on my lunch hours I would come home, like grab lunch and go sit in front of YouTube and just watch tutorials while I ate my lunch, and then I would go back to class. And then after class I would come home and not do any of my homework and instead just paint all night. And in fact, I started when I really started getting into it, I started a blog to kind of hold myself accountable, where I would post whatever I was working on every day, no matter how terrible it was, and it was very bad. But I did that for a year. I just posted. I did a piece of artwork every day and posted it on that blog, and eventually, like that practice of just practicing every day for a year. And I still, I try and do art every day, or do something creative or something like that every day. Yeah.
Did you teach yourself?
Pretty much.
A lot of
Yeah.
small.
Yep. Yeah.
I
I mean,
also taught myself.
Did you?
Like
Yeah.
I went to art school, but it was mostly traditional programs, so a lot of painting, acrylics,
Right.
and stuff. So I was mostly like a gallery painter before. Well, I was trying to be a gallery painter in LA, right? So not really anything. But yeah, to teach myself a lot of the Photoshop. I used to use Photoshop.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Everything.
I actually taught myself also that I went to art school at community college, and I went in and was like, hey, I want to draw comic books, and they were like, that's not real art, so I quit. And then I taught myself from there. I just bought books and books and books and books, and this was before YouTube was real big.
Right.
So it was mostly just stacks of Ben Caldwell books and stuff like that. But
This is really important. Now, I'm not going to tell you don't go to college, but I think all of us are like we are kind of we didn't have to go to school for art.
Right.
So like that is something that I don't know if a lot of people realize, like as they're getting into art and things like that. There's kind of the stigma that you have to go to art school. Whereas like I got a lot out of going to school for web design, like understanding coding and how back-end web development, app development works. I don't use it now, but it definitely has enriched my life in certain ways, and also like just all the business experience and things like that I got from doing those
Yeah,
sorts of
and
things.
I mean, even going, so I went to school and I have, my degree is a concentration in graphic design. But to get there, I went through, it's a fine arts degree with graphic design. So I
Right.
did sculpture and I did painting and I did, all of that stuff, which is really helpful to have an understanding of, even if it's not your medium, understand how the others work. And once you get out of school, like, I know you said you use After Effects. If you understand from the ground up how an artist works, then you can better understand what to ask for and what you need, and know,
Right.
your timelines and things like that.
That's
so,
why, the argument about the not going to college thing, I'm kind of, because we all, I think, like we were saying, picked up a crayon
Yeah.
and started drawing.
Yep.
And we taught ourselves because there's that passion, desire, but I
Right.
loved because I was, back in the 90s, I actually worked and did stuff with Disney. I was a traditional animator.
Oh wow.
Now that's all gone. It's all sent to Philippines and Korea and China.
Sure,
Like,
yeah.
Simpsons aren't even done here. You got some storyboard artists that film Roman, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So I started moving into, but I also was doing stuff as Photoshop was just coming out. So knowing how to do hand type,
Right.
typography with
Yep.
instead of thousands of fonts on my Adobe things now
Yeah.
was good basic stuff. Plus Disney wanted anatomy. They're like, we don't care if you can draw three-fingered mice. In fact, anytime you brought a portfolio, they'd rip it apart. They were basically saying too, it was like, bring us something that anyone besides your mother would like. Because your mother loves everything and hangs it on the,
Sure.
refrigerator
Yeah,
and
right.
stuff.
So-
So I think going to school was good for that, because
Yeah.
getting your stuff critiqued. Because if it's just you teaching yourself all the time,
Right.
which is still good, that passion to do your
Right.
own thing. But to have somebody who's actually above you a little bit that's been around can actually say,
yeah,
do this because this kind of pushes your eye this way. Do
I
this."
definitely think
'Cause I
that
have-
there's a place for that. I don't think it's for
Yeah.
everybody, but I think that it is, and I think that a lot of that can be proxied by friendships with other artists at
Right,
different
That's
levels.
exactly. Yeah.
that's where,
That's
like-
what the internet's great
Yeah.
for.
And that's
Especially-
a lot of the
Nolan-
benefit of school,
Yeah.
though. Also, is you're surrounded by other artists.
Right.
To Nolan's point, making sure that you're getting out there and getting your art out there. So
Yeah.
going to the conventions and
Yeah,
just
right.
showing people your stuff, you can get
point.
some of that experience and have some of those people going,
Right.
this is a really good foundation, but this is where you need to go.
Because
Yep.
a lot of us still don't think our stuff's all that great too. We're always like, it's
Like
like
any artist.
Yeah.
you
does.
do it for about
No
you-
artist
Yeah.
is happy with it.
I just
Part
think
of
you
it.
do it, you're happy for like 3 seconds, and you will come back and you go, oh.
You always
Yeah,
It's
go
want-
ahead.
never perfect,
So
but it's
actually
done.
going off the subject of looking at my stuff, not thinking it's great.
Mhm.
As a hobby, I do art, and sometimes I have art block because I think I don't like this, I don't like this.
Yeah.
In a workplace setting, if you have that same mentality, how do you keep pushing yourself forward if you're like, man, I don't feel good about this, but I need to do this job? You know?
Sometimes you
deadline?
just stare at your screen
Right.
and hate yourself for the day.
Yeah.
I mean,
and-
there's rough parts and you just kind of have to push past it. That's
And sometimes, I'm from my end anyway, when I'm trying to put things together or do a layout or something, and I'm like, this is really not working, but I know that that deadline is looming. You're like, this is awful, but if I can just push through, then I might get a good idea further down the road. So like, if you just keep going, and don't be afraid to step away for a couple minutes too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay to be like, all right, I'm gonna do another project for a few minutes, clear my brain, come back to this one. But sometimes that block makes you push harder than you thought you could, and then sometimes that's where some of your best work comes from.
Yeah.
Because you worked through it and you tried to think around your obstacle.
yeah. And a lot of times, what I'll do is like step away entirely for like hours or even like days, and just go, okay, I'm gonna go outside. I'm gonna look at some things. I'm gonna
Yeah.
watch a movie that I think is inspiring, or go like read someone else's comics that inspire me, something like that. And just kind of immerse myself in other things to just get my mind
Yeah.
flowing a little bit more.
How do you
know?
push past art block, Quantra? As you take a drink.
I think I'm a freelance artist, and I have been for, I don't know, last couple of years, right? And I think the story of being a freelancer is partially the story of just managing burnout.
Yeah.
And knowing your own burnout patterns, and knowing I'm not working this week, and that's fine, and taking advantage of that. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
where I'm at.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think a big part of it is as you it's just going to be a thing that happens no matter what. But as you do more and just grow more as an artist and get more experience and things like that, you learn to like manage that, and you also learn to just know when to quit a painting. Like if something's not working, you're just like nope. Yeah, you get better at learning that sort of thing. But deadlines was going to be my point too. Is that deadlines are so great for getting things done. Obviously, like imposing like those looming deadlines. It does, like if you have deadlines looming, like you just have to get it done. It doesn't matter like if you like have art block or not. You have to get it done because if you don't, you're not going to get hired. You're not going to get rehired. You're not going to get hired with other people.
Yeah, I would say also, my experience with freelancing is that before I was doing freelancing, I was just doing any old odd job that I could, right? And then freelancing on the side. And one big thing kind of about deadlines too is when you do feel like you're in a position to make that leap to full-time freelance, you don't have a lot of reasons to not get the thing done. You know what I mean? Like if you have a lot of other things that are pulling you, other commitments, maybe that part-time job or whatever, that can be a huge time suck. And it's not that you're wrong, it's just that's definitely going to cut into you going to the next level in terms of being a full-time, at least for me, becoming a full-time freelancer. So
I'm getting back into art from a couple years ago, and I was like, for practice, do you do specific, like, you want to get better at eyes, do you just hammer out eyes, or do you keep the whole form like draw an entire person?
So
practicing?
I actually stumbled upon an exercise that I've been using that is basically, that helps a lot. That you go, okay, I have 3 minutes and I have to draw 100 eyes on this, and I just do it real fast, and or like 100 female figures or 100 legs, or like and just break it down into little pieces and just do it over and over, and then over the course of a few months you'll have drawn that thing thousands of times. And so you'll have a better innate, even if it doesn't have to be right every time. Like just do it fast and then go back and look at it and evaluate it. But I find that helps a lot, is just doing it over and over and over and getting the muscle memory.
yeah,
Definitely.
plus one.
Yep. Studying other people's work too is really helpful. Like if you have an artist that you admire, or like a comic book art, or if you're drawing eyes, like whatever type of art you want, you admire, like you can kind of like just try emulating that. Obviously, like don't show that or sell that or anything, but for your own personal benefit, you can. It's really helpful to try and emulate
So
other
you would
people's.
advocate, like, just keep going for like just for a normal human or something, you keep going through every specific part, like form, eyes, head, and then sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I think
together
both.
when you're
Yeah.
highlighting.
Yeah, I think do the whole thing, but also do the pieces.
I think for anybody on any project, as soon as you get to that face, like your project slows down a lot, you know, big time. For anyone, even someone that's really good at doing form, you know, anyone that can knock it out. But I do notice that, like, the weakest parts in a portfolio will be the form. You know what I mean? Like, if there's one thing that's gonna be weak in someone's portfolio, it's the human figure. So if you do push that and make that really good, you can see that it pays out in terms of the kind of jobs you can get because you're more versatile. Like, a lot of people can draw background, a lot, you know? Make a background look awesome, trees, rocks, that's great. But to do the human figure, like not just in the distance, but like boom, right there, that's a real skill. It's rare, I'd say, you know, at least from what I know, and it's something that's really valuable to work on.
So as somebody who can only draw trees and rocks, I completely agree with Quancha.
I'm kind of the reverse of that.
Yeah.
Like scenery is my weak point.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know if I mentioned that. I'm an environment artist. I focus on designing environments and worlds and things like that. I do a little bit of figures, and any of the work that has my figures in it, I take exorbitant amounts of reference photos. Which to tie this all together though, like practicing is super important. In whatever form you're doing it, get practice in, especially even while you're working as a freelancer. If you're freelancing, if you're studying in school, whatever, practicing on your own, developing, even just like developing the skill and the mentality to take time to practice is so important. Because even now, I mean, we both have been working for years in the industry, and I'm assuming that, Quancha, you probably still take time to practice. Maybe not as much anymore,
Yes.
but yeah.
I do. No, I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say as an addendum to that,
Yeah.
if there's a project, the more valuable thing is a complete project rather than a great face. So if you do have a chance to complete a project, that's better to show someone than a bunch of practice stuff or exercises. Like exercises look, even if they're great, they look like you just got out of art school. And so I learned that quickly to take that out of my portfolio when I
Yeah,
go to these
don't
cons.
show those
Don't
ones.
show them. That makes you
Do them, but don't
first
show
thing.
'em.
First
Right.
thing.
Maybe
Yeah.
do
Do.
a portfolio while you're sort of in a middling phase where you're not really happy with your work yet.
You know, this is just maybe my opinion, but if I had to choose between that and just one project where you're showing execution from start to finish of a final something, even if it's something you just made up, way more valuable than some sketches. Way more valuable.
You had a question, right?
Great question. Involving the barrier of entry in general to getting work in the industry. So I go to DeviantArt, I see in the forums sometimes people look for work, and I see like right off the bat, bam, 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 these people are posting all their chibi work and all this other
Yeah.
stuff. There's a lot of anime mangas,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but overall, there's a lot of talented artists on there,
Yeah.
and they're charging what sounds to me, so I'm from a web development background,
Oh, awesome.
then I realize art
Yep.
is not as much, but I see people are asking for this money. It just sounds so ridiculously low for such great work.
Yeah.
So then there's the aspect of face-to-face relationships with, say, an
Yeah.
art director and publishers.
Yeah.
What is the truly most important thing to really scream louder than everybody else?
Yeah. Honestly, from our perspective, the face to face is real important. Like that's one of the main reasons we continue to work with Nolan is because we know him really well, we know what he's capable of, and we like working
There's
with
existing
him.
relationships,
Yeah.
even with web designers.
Right, yeah,
But it's
make-
hard to get, like, oh, my nephew does web design. Well, all right.
Yeah.
You know,
It's really important to how you present yourself from the very beginning. Like, you know, I mean, it's everybody says it, but first impressions are so important. That is, I know we're in the age of the internet and everything happens to be, you know, via email and whatnot, but the way you present yourself, like for me, you know, I use Behance, I use DeviantArt, you know, I'm on all of those looking for artists, and when I send you a message and I say, hey, you know, this is kind of the rough idea of a project we're looking for, you know, what do you think you could do? Do you feel comfortable with this? If you can come back to me and say, yep, here's some pieces that may not have been in my portfolio, here's some more stuff that's closer to what you're looking for, here's roughly how long I think it might take to complete something like that. Any of those, that information and that professionalism that you can bring to the table right from the get-go, that will separate you from the other artists that's like, yeah, that's a thing I do, just look at my portfolio. That's a big difference. And then if you can start that from the very beginning, because not everybody gets the chance to meet face to face. You know, a lot of it is done. I work with artists in Italy, so I'm never going to talk to them face to face, but they can present themselves well over the internet, and that will put them above other artists that are out there. And I'm willing to consider negotiating on timelines and rates and things like that if I feel like this person really knows what they're doing and they've got it all together.
Sorry. Would you guys say as publishers or art directors, you know, a lot of people have full day jobs or whatever. Do you have a tolerance for people that have a day job and this is something that they do moonlighting? Or do you not care? Do you say, I don't care as long as you can deliver by February 1st, you give me this character?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I freelance, like I said, I freelanced for years. I worked a full-time job and then I went home and I freelanced 30 hours a week on top of it.
Yeah, you get it on time. I don't care.
Yeah, like that doesn't bother me. Personally, that doesn't bother me at all. I know a lot of people have done that.
So I've got something about this really quick. In the back, we'll jump to you next. If you don't have to keep your hand up. So I'm sorry. What? Remind me what.
There's a tolerance for knowing an artist might have a day job, will be able to get the job done.
So when I was doing New Bedford for you guys, they came to me with New Bedford, and they're like, "Hey, we kind of want to have this done in like 4 weeks. Can you do this?" Under normal circumstances, you probably like knock out a pretty like medium weight game in 4 weeks if you are working full time on it, right? If you're spending 40 hours on it. I was working full time. I had a day job at the time, and so I was working 40 hours a week already, and then coming home and working another 40 hours on this game. So it definitely happens, and as long as you're delivering, I don't think it matters. Would you? Do you have
agree.
experience?
Yeah, but it's a big question on like when you're gonna jump ship and not do the other thing, because the other thing really, when it starts to become like a lead weight, then I mean obviously when, but yeah, the question is when you figure that out. But also to go back to your thing about cheap art on like say DeviantArt. A lot of those dudes are like in countries where their dollar goes way farther. So they're in like Eastern Europe. And so they can do stuff and charge almost nothing and then So
I noticed that a lot of Eastern Europeans, maybe Asian areas, it seems like there's a lot of artists there. So will that be a problem for somebody that lives in the US?
I'll tell you what. A handshake in the US at Gen Con and Origins goes a very, very long way. It goes a long way. Because, and also, if you're a gamer, that also, there's a twinkle in the eye that matches the guy you're talking to,
Yep.
And that does matter a lot more than really good art, because all these guys, they all have experience, some nightmare experience working with a dude from some other country who, because of a lot of reasons, maybe he was young, maybe it's the communication, walked off the project, so they're all afraid of that, like terrified of that, because a lot of money's going into these things. So yeah, like meeting someone in person is really important, and
Yeah, they kind of tie those two things together a little bit. Communication is just the most important thing in the entire world. Like especially if you're working a day job and you go, hey, I'm real close on this. I need just a couple extra days on this deadline. I'm real inclined to give that to you as long as I know ahead of time. But if you just deliver it late, then it's like, well, this guy's not a professional,
That's where Nolan and I were able to work things out because of that. So if you don't want to present that immediately, that's fine. But when you actually start working on the project, don't be afraid to say like, hey, life happens. We get that. We're humans. We've all freelanced. We understand.
Or like, this is taking longer than I thought it would.
Yeah, just tell us up front, and that's where Nolan and I were able to be like, oh, okay, that horrendously close deadline that's only 2 days away. I'm sorry. What if I can give you another day? Does that work? And we'll work with you.
Yeah.
One second, in the back.
Yeah.
Okay. So on the other side of things, once an artist gets even like a moderate social following, you start getting the hey, will you do my card game? Like you start getting those kind of
Great exposure.
And, well, not even just exposure, but kind of what are the warning signs or red flags of like competent companies that are looking at you for work, and then just guy whose Kickstarter might take off.
Do they give you a contract? Yeah.
I'm assuming you kind of know that kind.
Yeah, get a contract.
What are some good warning signs?
Well, so I've had some interesting experience with this. So I guess I've been a little bit lucky in the sense, but the people that I've worked with who have approached me as just like, hey, I want to work with you, I've done like a ton of digging on them ahead of time. So like that's I think really important is to like find out who they are, and not just like if they've ever been successful before, but like find out who they are as a person and kind of trust your gut on that. Like I just did a project recently with Letterman Games, and the guy reached out to me about working on it, and we ended up like talking about like our culture and our heritage and stuff like that, and we like just started a good rapport online, and that was like kind of that gave me a good feeling about it. And then like going and looking, he had done other successful projects before, so it was a very easy jump for me to be like, okay, I think I can trust that we will that this is even worth my time considering. So like doing background research on whoever contacts you, like extensive background research, like put on your hacker hat and figure out. Like, yeah, and go FBI on them.
If they don't come to you with a contract, then you need to say, like, that sounds great, let's start a contract, let's start setting that up. And if that scares them away, you did not want to work with them in the first place.
Yeah, I would say as an artist, as a freelancer, it's good to have your own contract to present to potential employers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not really gonna give anybody up front.
Yeah.
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 Right.
I think it's also important. I mean, I at least for me, those kinds of projects were the first projects I got. So it's important to like recognize the roots of where I came from.
Yeah.
And I like to take like one project a year that's sort of more mom and pop.
Yep.
If it's the right guy that I met, again, like if I met somebody at a con or something like that, that's really valuable, and it can be a really nice experience to work with someone who's, getting up on their feet a little more. But yeah, contract is.
Yeah, because that's when I started
That's the thing.
freelancing. It didn't matter how small you were, but if I said, hey, let's set up a contract, if that was scary to you,
Yeah.
or you didn't want to do that, you didn't want to commit, that's kind of a red flag.
Yeah, and I think they're more scared of an artist walking out. I haven't had a really terrible experience with a client backing out of a contract, but I do know plenty of artists, and it's not even because they're douchebags. It's because like someone got married, someone had kids,
Right.
like it's serious life stuff that just came along
Yeah.
and swept them away. But I feel like artists are in general the ones I hear about, kind of like the risk factor is there.
Right. Have we mentioned how important it is to get face to face and meet people face to face at conventions? Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
How often have, well, I guess a better question is, how cooperative are the artists with whoever is hiring them? Because, like for graphic design, a lot of times they'll be like, I don't really like that.
Oh, man.
You have to change that.
Yeah.
And how often does that typically happen? Because some pieces, yes, you can tweak
Right.
in Photoshop,
Right.
but
Right.
with paintings, for example.
Yeah.
What's your experience with Renegade with this? I'm really curious.
With Renegade?
Yeah.
Great team, really professional. A half-finished game is like the bane of my existence for the last year, because that means going backwards on the project and changing art and like all the things you just mentioned. Personally, I don't take a game anymore that's not done, rulebook done. A lot of rulebooks are being made like while art's still being finished, and it can be a nightmare. It sucks. But sometimes it happens. You gotta be nice about it. You know?
That's really important. That's a really important point, and I'm gonna bookmark that and go back to it. But I think also to that point about going back and tweaking things, when we did New Bedford, this is a story that stands out to me a lot because we were in a rush to get it done. But I submitted an artwork for the cover. And we were rushing to beat the deadline. I was working 40 hours a week, but Jen and Adam ended up posting it on BGG and getting like the community reaction to it, and that was like a really incredible experience because like the community reacted to it. They're like, "Hey, this isn't that good," and I'm like, "Yeah, man, it's really not that good." And they came back to me. They're like, "Hey, can you fix this stuff?" And we went through like a whole bunch of changes on different assets for the game and things like that. And in that situation, it was really great. And what I'm getting at is that game turned out really fantastic. Not the art, the game itself, like the whole product, because of all the work that was put into it. And even like at the time, I was like, "Oh, I can't believe I'm having to go back and tweak all these different things and stuff like that." But it made the product really great. And getting to like have your art or on a great product, that's just the best. So I mean, under most circumstances, I think it's probably a good thing, unless it's just like the client is being really picky about it.
There is a line. So because I do the graphic design and I do the creative direction, there's definitely a line where it's like, all right, the designer's just being too picky. If they're like, but I really wish that was green. That would look so much better. Like, then I can do that in Photoshop. If I say, hey, do you mind if I change this color? And you say, yep, and that's great, and I'll do it on my end. I don't need to go back to you for that. So if it's little things like that, then they're being kind of picky. There are times where compositionally you might be like, oh, this was going to work, and then it doesn't, and you try to tweak. One of the great ways to avoid, let them know what medium you work in. So right now I'm working with an artist who does traditional watercolor. Because I know that up front, I'll put more effort into sketches and color blocking things and all of that beforehand and put some of those into the layouts so that we know that it works before they put all that time into laying in every single detail.
Yeah, with traditional media, you want to just get as many early proofs as you can before things are real locked in, and then just know that once they start painting it, that's kind of it, and you have what you have.
And so we'll set out a schedule and we'll say, all right, the first round's just going to be, just give me compositional sketches. I don't need any details, I just want a rough idea of how you want to lay this out. And then we'll start, going in and getting a little bit more finite with that, and then we'll color block things, and we'll go through that process to avoid as many of those issues where you're like, well, I watercolored this, it's not Photoshop, I can't edit undo, I don't know what you want me to do now. And you can avoid some of that.
So I think this is a really great topic that we should all talk about. Like, what is the entire process of starting out, like for you guys reaching out to an artist and then seeing it to completion.
May I ask what each of you do? Like if you.
Did you miss our introductions?
I did. I
okay.
came a little bit.
That's okay.
I see how it is. All right, we're not
Sorry.
going to talk.
It's really not important enough.
There's some new people in the room.
Yeah. Just to catch everybody up, I'm the art director at Greater Than Games. I'm also a primarily comic book illustrator, digital illustrator, and I've done a handful of our games. Sentinels of the Multiverse being the most famous of those.
So I'm the creative director for Greater Than Games, so I do graphic design and layout, and then I do creative direction on things like Spirit Island, New Bedford, some of that stuff.
And I'm Nolan Nasser, and I am an independent illustrator, and I do a lot of work with Greater Than Games. I do a lot of freelance work with them. I do mostly environment design, and I do a lot on my own. I do a lot of world building and just IP development and game development.
I'm also a freelance illustrator. My name's Quan Chai. I've done a couple games with a bunch of the publishers there, including Catacombs, Kodama, Capital Lux, Dinosaur Island, Flip Ships, the new Renegade game, Kepler, a bunch of stuff.
Going into the process, that's kind of what I really wanted to know.
How does the process work?
I know with card games, if you're doing Magic the Gathering or something, right? There's there's a ton of artists that are working on just that series that's coming out. And each one's working on maybe 2 or 3 cards. But with a board game, is one guy doing the entire board, the pieces, the cards, the box art?
Our process is a little bit. We can only really speak to our process and how we work. And I know everyone does it a little bit differently, but the way that we do it is we'll have initial meetings about how we want the game to look, and Jen will do some style boards and stuff like that, and then we will find artists online that are specifically what we're looking for most of the time, or we'll go, hey, is this something that I can do? Is this something that Nolan can do? Is this something that one of the other artists that we've worked before can do? Because we do prefer to work with people that we've worked with before. And then from there, we assemble an art list of all of the assets that we need, and then basically assign those out. And then there's a back and forth initial email chain, and we get proofs of it, approve the proofs, and then we get the finals.
Yeah.
So.
And to your question, is it always the same artist? It will vary by game, depending, how many components are in a game, or, art styles, or sometimes you just feel like a game needs multiple artists, maybe because you want someone who's strictly good at, say, landscapes, or someone who's good at board illustrations versus someone who's better at more of a card illustration or things like that. So that can vary depending on what you want, and that's where we would sit down and say, what do we want this to look and feel like, and what are those components, so that we know and we can go to artists and ask for the correct things from them.
I do have a question, actually, too. Would you ever hire someone who can do both maybe graphic design and illustrate? And I guess the second part, would it be good to promote that if you're, also talented in After Effects or other things too?
I mean, it's always good to promote that. And we have an in-house graphic design team, Jen and Ray back there.
Hi, Ray.
Those are our graphic designers. So we don't hire out for that.
But I know people who do.
Not, I mean, not a lot of companies. Not a lot of, especially like indie board game companies have that. So I mean, you guys are kind of an anomaly.
Yeah.
And you guys are a bigger company too. But I know Quanjai, you did all of the graphic design for Catacombs, right? When you designed it.
So I'm not a graphic designer, and I wouldn't say I am. I can do it if that's what they need. But now all the big companies have their own in-house guys. So, and honestly, if you're really an illustrator, you don't want to be doing pre-press and color proofs and back and forth with FTP with the printer. It's like a nightmare. It's the least fun thing they can possibly do as an artist. So if you can, just illustrate, send the raw files, you're done.
Yeah.
But I would, if you have really good type, for example, that sells. If you can lay out in a space so that your image has more importance and it has a purpose, even better. Because if you, like, say you do a painting, it's great, but like you need to hold the publisher's hand and see, like, this is what I'm thinking is where the type would go, where this would go. That really helps to sell it because it gives you it gives more presence.
Being able to have that dialogue, just having that knowledge can be really helpful, and that's where we were saying what helps you stand apart. That's something that can help you stand apart because you understand, the principles of layout and how that's going to work.
Yeah, you know
Your
there's going to
art,
be logos going
right?
there.
You can then build your art around that, and then you can say like, "Hey, I left a space here for this logo, and I left this here for that," and you can build a better dialogue that way, and it ultimately makes a better product. So then your art shines better on the shelf because you understand how it works.
Yeah, no one mentioned that we might do some portfolio. If people have portfolios, you can take a look at them.
Yeah.
And I brought mine just if people want to look at what I show at stuff.
Do I pass it around? Or no?
Maybe at the end we can just take a look at it. If you have questions specifically about that, I think that would be awesome at the end too. So yeah.
Do you have a question?
Talking about like needing a second job and marketing yourself, being a freelance artist, like how and can you get consistent, reliable work, or are there companies that will assign you work that you can make, like a reliable income off of, like without needing to,
Yeah, so it's definitely possible. So for me, it was really important when I started working that I made a good impact, not only just like with good art, but also just being reliable and having like a really good work ethic. These were things that I felt were super important to clients. So if I did those things, then I would probably hopefully get rehired a lot. And I think that's what helped form a really great relationship with Greater Than Games. And now it's to the point where I can pretty much just rely on the work that I do with them, and maybe take some other work with other companies. But definitely, but it's important that you not only foster a relationship with certain companies, but if you can prove to them that you have a great work ethic and whatnot, and foster that relationship, there's definitely a lot of opportunity to have a main source of income from freelancing with maybe one or two companies.
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
Yep.
I mean, 3 years ago, I was tutoring little kids in math, while trying to be I was doing. So after I graduated art school, and I had these. I was doing gallery painting work, which doesn't really. Good luck trying to be a gallery artist in LA, right? But then it's possible to freelance full time. And one other thing that's important, I think, to point out is that if you're just doing art and if you think art's just this thing you pass off to a publisher and they just run with it, it's the wrong approach. If you want to be a full-time freelance artist, you have to exist in their sphere, which means going to conventions, which means dialoguing, and means being there just not as an email address, but being there so that they know you're a person, you have a life, and this is something you're committed to, and not just something that you're doing for fun.
how long did it take you to get to that point where you could just rely on your contacts?
It took me 3 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
About the same.
Yeah.
Are there companies out there that will hire illustrators and give them assigned work like that, or do you are you choosing to be a freelance artist at this point? Or are there companies that will kind of take you under the wing and have you on a payroll?
There are a few of the bigger companies that hire full-time artists. I know there's one of my friends works full-time for Weird, but not a lot in the board game industry. Because there's just not a huge necessity for it. I mean, art's
I don't know of any personally.
Yeah.
That does there's not in-house jobs usually.
In board
for
games,
illustrators.
the art is so project-based
Yeah.
and you need something drastically different for one thing than you do for another.
Right.
And so, I am a staff artist because I own the company. You know, so
So there's always that
so you
route.
could do that. Also, you can just start your own, and that's a perfectly awesome thing to do. But otherwise, yeah, just freelancing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
For those that are freelancing, how do you value your time when approaching a board game project? Do you look at all the components, or do you rely on the publisher to say, this is my budget for art, can you deliver these assets within this period of time?
For those that aren't freelancing?
Our
For
freelance.
For our
for you
freelancing.
guys.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you? So how do you value?
How do you value your time, your work for publishing,
Okay.
for a project?
Do you have a?
Yeah, I the way I usually work, I'll get a little technical, is that they send me a components list, and then I itemize it based on a fee structure that I usually work with. That gives me a big number, and then that big number is the one that you batter around with the publisher until it sounds right for both of you. And then if so, then you sign a contract, and then on the signing I get half up front and then half at the end of the project.
Yeah, it's very similar to mine as well.
So do you guys find yourselves typically doing like main art for like cards and things like that, or do you do a lot of tokens and board illustrations and things like that? I'm not sure where the graphic designer
Yeah.
stops and the artist starts in some places.
So I personally I like when games like the graphic design and the illustration like meld seamlessly. So I like illustrating a lot of assets. I like illustrating the logos for things for my stuff anyways. So like I like that there to be a melding of those things. So definitely a combination of like doing illustrative work, but then also like making drawing a picture of a potion or something, right? Like
Yeah, I do top down. So I'll take a project specifically because I'm doing all the art on it.
Yep.
But then the graphic design is a big part, and that's all the layouts and stuff. And hopefully that person's really good at it. I've worked with a lot of nice people, and
I
good at it.
do
Yeah.
a lot of graphic design for board games, especially of late, and most of my experience has just been I've been getting like card art, and then I'll design around the art to make it blend in and work together.
Yep.
But been graphic design for 22 years and a label printing company, so fairly new to board games just last 3 years.
I think that's a very in demand. A good graphic designer in the board game industry right now is more in demand than like a good artist. I think.
So
That's what I
there's
think. Yeah.
the way that we approach it, or the way that I approach it, I do kind of the same thing. I'm going to go top down. There are things that I absolutely know that I can't do. I'm not going to be drawing a gorgeous landscape picture anytime soon for this game, and I'm going to start there and I'm going to prioritize all of those. And then when it starts getting down into the nitty gritty of like icons or borders or things like that, depending on the look and feel of the game, if it's something like Spirit Island where that whole game is supposed to feel very watercolor, then you might rely on your artist and be like, hey, can you make some vines that we can use on a border, and give them a very specific thing that we need to use. But if it's general icons or something like that, like myself or Ray, we'll sit down and we'll hammer out icons there on site just as part of the graphic design of the game, and we'll figure out what we can do to make that work. So sometimes there is absolutely a blending, but the best thing to do is just go kind of that top down, and these are the things I know I can't do. When you start getting into the nitty gritty, how important is it really to have the artist do that? Because that's also more of their time. It's also more of your money. That's, the timing, the budget, if I send 15 pieces of art to him, do I really want to add 20 icons to that list? Or do I want to give him another week that he could have been working on that art?
That's a true point.
That's good.
Yeah.
We can move on to someone else.
Now, it was, so working freelance, do you ever get percentages of the games? Because you have a lot of games under your belt now, so you would assume that would start, like...
I know Josh Capel, anyway, he's the only person I know that takes a percentage, like specifically, in his contract he wants a percentage. I only take percentages if someone can't meet my upfront quote. Because I'd like to just take the money as a flat thing and just and run with it.
That's most artists will.
I don't know if it, yeah.
But that's kind of a question for Paul. Have we ever given a percentage to an artist?
We would never do.
Yeah,
So it's funny because my other 25% business is in children's books, and that is an industry completely based around percentages. So it's funny to interact with different clients, and the one client with book publishing is way more established than board games, and they up front they have exactly the percentage you get for print and for media and for all this stuff. So I don't know if it'll ever evolve into that. I don't think so, but it's not like that's not unheard of.
The reason why we don't do it, just to answer that question a little bit more, the reason why I say we would never do it is because either, like, if the game doesn't perform super well, then I'm way underpaying, like aggressively underpaying an artist for their work, which is just terrible with someone being freelance, right? And then on the other side of things, if a game is like a wildly huge success, then I'm way overpaying for the art, right? So it doesn't really, I'm either like cheating the artist out of things or overpaying for something unnecessarily, which is a bad business decision.
Yeah, we'd rather just pay what the art's worth.
Yeah, I just want to pay
and be done with it, essentially.
So, I have a little bit of a different experience. I personally, I'm stepping a little bit back from freelance. You're not going to find that in freelance at all because of the example Paul gave. But I've helped develop some IP and worlds and things like that. So like the art that I'm doing, I got paid for. But because I was also helping to develop the world and like create the characters and what the world would look like and that sort of thing, I got a bonus percentage from the project. So that is viable, but it's not. I mean, it's gonna be a more involved project. It's not just. I'm not just getting a list of components. Instead, I'm like, okay, I have to work with the team. I was like working with them every day, all day, trying to figure out like how are we going to do this? Like, what is this going to look like? And so, it is something that might come up. And there are a few games and artists and companies that have done that.
Yeah. If you end up as like a partial owner of the IP, essentially,
Right.
then, like, yeah, that would make sense.
Transcended just being the freelance artist
Right.
at that point. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So Nolan, you were saying that you were noticed because of the watercolor.
Yeah.
So do you all feel like you each have a unique selling point or stylization that you can describe?
So I was noticed by them because of the watercolor, but that's because they asked for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if
right.
you're in a smaller group, so
Yes.
they see watercolor.
Yep.
And they find you.
Right.
Like your art.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wasn't doing watercolor at the time, but I do, absolutely. Having a style and having kind of like your own brand, I think is really important. And this actually relates to a lot of the points that we've been making. And somebody had asked about, I can't remember, the point that I was going to make though was that having your own brand kind of creates your own like following, right? We've been talking about like having your own following and that sort of thing, and that is alluring for publishers. Is if like an artist has their own following. Like I think Quanchai is kind of at that point where Quanchai has a little bit of his own following because of the work that he's done in the game industry, and that's alluring for publishers to have. To be able for people to recognize like, hey, this is Quanchai's style, and this is a Quanchai game, right? There's a few other artists in the industry that are like that, and I think that's really important. Having your own brand.
I think most people have one style, but I have a few. I think that's not necessarily the norm, but your thing about brand is important. And I think the important thing that I remind myself every day is that there's a lot of stuff going on. Right? There's Gen Con and there's portfolios and there's how to present yourself. But the thing about the board game industry is that it is relatively young, say. And so your product as an artist is the art. And if that thing is really good, you can go places in board games still. Like it's not as regimented. There's not a lot of really hard gatekeepers yet like other industries are.
Video games particularly.
Exactly.
Real hard to get into.
Like you could take, like I after I graduated art school, I did like sci-fi art circuits and Spectrum and a bunch of other stuff to try and get in. And you go up with your portfolio and there's a line or a waiting list because they're expecting that already. When I did that at Origins 4 years ago, publishers were like, what? Yeah, do you want to get coffee? Sit down. You want to sit down? Because they just, when you can take that professionalism and a product that you've worked on and focused on that really good art, I feel like it goes places. It's more
Like
valuable.
I know on our end, if you have created that brand for yourself or that awareness of this is the type of art that I'm very good at, then when I'm sitting here creating a project from the ground up going, what do I think is the right look and feel for this game? And I feel like, oh, you know who can do that? This person. That's what they're known for. And then you start remembering people because of that. Now, to the other side of that, if you can do other things too, and you can do that well, that can give you some flexibility. So I might be like, this person's really good at that, and I like working with them, and I know they can kind of do this thing too. Maybe I can use them a little bit on this other project as well. But having that core brand and that core focus that you're really dedicated to and you're really good at so that you can be super efficient or just really well known for that can be really great.
So do you think breaking into the industry is very important then to get following and then sort of swell up?
It doesn't hurt. I don't think it's necessarily important. I mean, you can do it without a
Either way.
following.
Yeah.
But it helps.
Same, yeah, same.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a trap than it helps. When you have followers on something, it's nice, but as an artist, what you're trying to do as a freelance artist is sell the publisher. What does the publisher need right now? What do they need in 6 months? It doesn't. I mean, it's nice to have a following, but I feel like that just makes your head swell. And like, who am I? I'm just an artist,
And
So
when,
it's
like,
important to know.
when I'm
publisher
looking, I'm not gonna go and see how many followers you have on DeviantArt or who's following you on Pinterest or Instagram, whatever it is. I want to know what your quality of work is.
Your following ultimately will get you noticed more than it is a benefit when I'm like looking.
Yeah.
So
It's good for promoting yourself, but it's not necessarily what's going to get you the
Right.
job.
Yeah.
Your art is what's going to do that.
Right.
So you're finding artists through mostly just interaction, like face-to-face people presenting their portfolios, or
people send us portfolios all the time. We go on a lot of different art websites. as
Yeah,
you
yeah,
mentioned.
Behance, DeviantArt. There's another big one that I can't think of right now that I go to. So it's both. It's people that have presented, like I said,
Yeah.
people will send us.
But then also
portfolios.
every single year I come here, I walk around
Yeah.
the entire artist
Artist
alley.
alley.
I collect business cards of people that I like.
Yep.
So
So
And
you
that's
guys
what,
put stuff on your site then? That, like your name and like send portfolio here?
I mean, we
You guys
we
come-
have our emails on the website. Yeah.
Because I know some of the gaming companies don't. They just
Yeah,
like they're
we're still small enough that you can do that and it'll eventually filter to the right people. Larger companies, there's so many people, the person getting those emails and the person that they need to go to, not necessarily the same person.
Right.
And that's where coming to Gen Con, presenting yourself, being an artist alley, having your work out there on the internet, that's going to be very, very crucial.
Yeah, like what some people don't realize is like Gen Con is this awesome event, and Aston's amazing, but a lot of business is being done, like handshake business deals are being done on the floor. So like you taking your thing to out there, all these you'll see like in the bigger booths, there's little offices built, and it's not just to hold product, it's to take meetings with illustrators and designers, finished prototypes they're looking at. So that's why I go to these things, because one, I love it, but also like business is being done on the floor. If you show your face, you can.
And that's what we
Get
come
out.
to Gen Con going, all right, what are our next projects for the year?
Yeah.
What kind of art style do we want? And we will walk around specifically looking for people that can match that
Yeah,
style.
this is a big time business show for us.
A lot of word of mouth too.
We'll probably do one more and then
Yep.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Yeah, one more question.
Any?
We're either
Yeah.
terrified.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Is it? This is mainly for freelancing. Is it recommended to have studio experience prior to freelancing, or essentially is it too early to freelance straight out of school or anything like that?
I don't think so.
I don't know who jumps from studio to freelancing in board games. The money gap is humongous.
Yeah.
Like most of my friends that work at Marvel and Disney and all those guys, unless they love board games, which is the awesome thing about the board industry, there's no reason to jump because that's a big
Right. They also work them like ILM and stuff like they work their artists like 16-hour days for many weeks in a row. So. Yep.
All right.
Yep. All right. Cool.
All right.
Well.
I'm fine standing out in the hall and doing some.
Sure, yeah.
some prints
I'll stand
and-
outside with this
Yeah.
thing.
Cool.
If anyone.
Thanks everybody for
Yeah.
coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much.